Good afternoon, everybody. It's David Perlmutter from QuantumListing, and thank you for joining us today on our webinar, Office Dealmaking from Home with Griddig. We're very fortunate to have Dan Mihalovich, Griddig's founder, with us, and like all of my favorite real estate tech people, Dan is a commercial real estate broker as well. So he is providing a solution for a problem that he has personally dealt with throughout his career. And, because he had the problem, he found the solution and he wants to share it with us today. So let me tell you a little bit more about Dan. Dan has a dream and he wants to share it with us. And its roots are in Tikkun Olam, repairing the world. After a successful 30-year career in office leasing, 16 of them at Cushman & Wakefield, and then he founded and ran the Space Place for 14 years. He set out to cure the pains experienced by every person involved in the office leasing process. Tenants, brokers, landlords, and service providers like architects, general contractors, and real estate counsel. In 2012, Dan formed Griddig, an online platform for the industry. And Griddig isn't just a place to negotiate and close leasing agreements, it's the quintessential method for every team to collaborate and efficiently manage their leasing activities to get deals done in record time with transparency and clarity on every leasing issue. And he didn't found this Griddig all these years ago to deal with something like the global pandemic, but it just happens to be the right solution at the right time. So welcome, Dan, and I am going to hand it off to you. Here's Dan in his broker costume, and yeah, looking like I would have confidence that you're going to lead me to the right decision there in that picture, Dan. Thank you.
All right. Appreciate that.
So tell us a little bit about Griddig, or a lot about Griddig.
Sure. Well, first of all, I want to thank everybody for taking time, especially now when we all have lots of other important things to do. Although I think deal flow at the moment is pretty abysmal. So for those of you who are in the deal making business, maybe this is a good way to spend an hour. I hope so. And I hope also that we're going to show you something that you'll find to be really earth-shattering in our business. I just want to make a few sort of introductory comments, and then I'm going to dive right into Griddig. But David, I appreciate your sharing some of my background, because I think street cred. Pardon me? I think street cred is really important when you're talking to an audience like you have. So I'm not just a theoretical techie, but I'm actually a leasing expert with a rather extensive background. So I want to mention really quickly, I'm from San Francisco. I spent a couple of years at Cal. I graduated from UC Davis in Ag Econ. My first career, I spent 4 years as a grain trader at Louis Dreyfus in the Midwest.
Oh, I'm friends with William. I was friends with William.
With Louis Dreyfus?
Yeah, he was in my poker group.
Oh, wow.
We'll talk about that another time.
A shrewd gambler, I'm sure. But I joined Cushman & Wakefield in 1982, which is about 100 years ago. I was a director of leasing there, as David said, for 16 years. I thought I should just mention that at one point I was the #1 broker in the Western region in 1991, before some of your attendees were born. And prior to my departure in 1998, I was the first and only broker in the company to have a website, even before Cushman & Wakefield did. So the Space Place brokerage, which started in '98, is a tenant rep firm. As David mentioned, in 2012, I started Griddig, launched it in 2014, and I continue to run both companies. I'm going to log into my Space Place brokerage account on Griddig in a minute, and I'm going to show you the highlights. For context, I believe that very few people are familiar with the grain industry, but in my view, it's the most efficient marketplace known to man. And so lots of us have studied in Econ 1, we studied perfect competition that actually exists in the grain markets, but certainly not in office leasing markets. So in office leasing, we'll struggle for months putting together a 10,000-foot deal worth, $3 or $4 million in rent and tenant improvements. In the grain business, I would have made a $4 million trade with a competitor in literally a few minutes. And so, as I've often said, if you've ever touched an office leasing deal, you have the scars to prove it. So Griddig uses software to improve and speed up the entire office leasing paradigm. It removes the drudgery and the mistakes that make the process so painfully long and confusing for our clients. So I thought I would mention also, because we're dealing in this paradigm, that what's required is a change of behavior to use software, to use a platform like Griddig. So when a paradigm changes, and I obviously believe that it is and it will continue to, but you either change with it or you become a victim of it. And but changing behavior, especially in our dinosaur industry, it isn't something that most people are willing to do. You're probably doing deals the same way you did 10 or 20 years ago, except for minor improvements from Microsoft or CoStar. So we're all witnessing now how forcefully some people refuse to change their behavior, even in the current pandemic, even in the face of potential death. So it's in our business, most landlords and brokers still believe that emailing PDF documents around is the most efficient way to negotiate and sign deals, and that paying a certain third party a ton of money every month to post our listings, yet shield your listings from public view, is an intelligent business decision. So welcome to Griddig and the 21st century. Let me share my screen here, and it looks like I'm going to have to find my. Hang on one second. Okay. And here is Griddig. Okay. So so let me just get a very quick layout, and I'm going to sign into my account. There is a 3-minute demo video right here. I'm not going to play it for you right now, but you can come back to it later. And you won't have time for coffee during that video. It's very fast moving. But so here's what we have. Finding office space is what tenants do. Listing office space, is what landlords do, or sublessors. And then down at the bottom here, we have a value proposition for our 4 constituent groups. So Griddig is a collaborative software system of tools that enables all parties to a transaction to collaborate and to actually get letters of intent signed right on Griddig. So landlords, tenants, brokers, and all the service providers that we all wind up using in transactions, space planners, contractors, real estate lawyers. So I'm going to quick. So look, these are. I should point out something that's not obvious to everyone. There is no software for you to download. So all the software is right in front of you. It's right on the site. All of the tools you'll see are pre-populated, but it's very important for people to understand there's not a security issue of some kind where you have to download some programs that your company might not approve. So let me sign in really quickly, and I'm going to sign into my brokerage account. You'll see all kinds of confidential things that I shouldn't be sharing. So once you have an account, which will take about 20 seconds for any of you to create, Let's hope that this is going to work quickly while we're on a webinar. There we go. So this is my own personal dashboard, and let me just show you a couple things here. Is that large enough, David, that everyone
Yes,
can read it?
I can see it. Hopefully everybody else can.
All right. So let me just show you. This is it's very simply laid out. On the left-hand side, client searches. Those are tenant projects. On the right-hand side, these are listings. So whether they're direct space listings or sublease listings, they would be on the right side. Up at the top, these are sort of a summary page of all of my clients. Tenant. These are tenant rep searches. These would be all of my buildings listings. We have some other features here which I could talk about later if there's time. On my dashboard here, these are the most recent letters of intent that I've had open. If I want to create a new letter of intent, I can click here, or you'll see that whenever you're inside a project, it's very quick and easy to create a new letter of intent. So let me just show you what my tenant searches look like. Remember, the Space Place is a tenant rep firm. So what you're going to see here, these are, is this legible, David? Large enough?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay. So
also,
these
by the
look
way,
like,
just people can, if you sort of move your cursor, you can increase the size of what's being displayed on the screen on the right-hand side, just if for the people who are watching it at home.
Yeah. So maybe I should click off my video. That will help a little bit there. Okay. So let me just point out what the most obvious things here. So these are tenant clients or prospective tenants. And from the Space Place, from my perspective, using an advanced technology as a way to separate ourselves from the rest of the brokerage community, to show that we embrace technology, and that this, in fact, is a way to demonstrate to a prospective client, like, this is how we're going to manage your project. So let me just, I'm going to pick one here. This is Dillingham and Murphy. So this is a small law firm requirement we worked on a few years ago. So one of the more obvious things I want to point out is that all of the contacts and information that you had accumulated, whether it's space programming data for that client, or letters of intent, or the fully executed letter of intent, all of that information still resides here, so that you can very easily pull it up at any time. Okay, so, but let me just click this open, and you'll see that this is the typical nav that you'll see throughout the entire platform. There's a manager team tool, space programming tool to search and review the listings that are on your short list. There's a tour booklet. There's the number crunching tool that helps tenants in the tenant version. That tool helps tenants to compare and contrast the economics, the total occupancy cost across a few of their finalist buildings. And then there's the letter of intent tool, which I'll get to in a minute. But we're on the manage your team. So here's the first sort of big idea. And that is that from your couch or from wherever you are, you can invite onto your team. What we have here is the managing partner of this law firm, the firm administrator, the general contractor, the architect, and my colleague and I. So everyone that you invite onto your team, presumably, is a trusted member of your team, and everyone has view and edit privileges. Now, this is a collaborative system of tools, of software, and I have to say that it's rather obvious that not everyone that works in our industry takes a collaborative approach. And I think that type of sort of hiding the ball kind of approach that I think a lot of brokers mistakenly take is it's just going to run its course, because this is so much more efficient and transparent with our clients that expect to see this level of due diligence. So the first thing that we're going to do with a tenant before we go out and actually tour buildings is, to the extent people are touring buildings these days, we've built a programming tool, and I'll just tell you the most recent advancement is probably coming next week, but we have a circulation factor of 40%. This is just the hypothetical space requirement, but I will say we built this sophisticated tool so that either on your own as a broker in advance of meeting with a tenant, or collectively with your tenant, client, and the architect, probably within 5 or 10 minutes, you can come within 5% of the total square footage you're going to need. There are a couple of columns in here for the initial move-in and taking into account expansion needs. But we've pre-populated this tool with every kind of space that we could think of. When you click on View Example Configurations, that you can choose from or not. I mean, this is like just point and click. If you want private offices that are 150 square feet, you check this. If you want a different size, you check something else. But there are workstations, benching, reception areas, conference rooms, training rooms, kitchens, all the way down to file cabinets and so on. But whatever selections you've made here are going to be saved in this table. So I want to keep moving this very quickly, but the idea here is there's a lot of imagine that you're building software for the whole industry to help people to avoid making mistakes. And how many times does it happen that the wheels fall off a deal because the tenant didn't properly figure out how much space they need, and you start negotiating with a bunch of buildings. No one wants to pay for space planning until you kind of have a ratification of the business terms, and then you find out we made a mistake and we can no longer consider your building. So get it right the first time. Again, there's a lot of ounce of prevention in this whole platform. I really don't want to spend too much time on this search tool, but right now we've built out a listing platform that at the moment is just for the 9-county San Francisco Bay Area. It's 430 million square feet of total inventory. There are 27,000 office buildings in the Bay Area. If you do work in the Bay Area and you control listings, I invite you to you can contact me with any questions. But I'll show you a little later how easy it is to add a listing. But unlike well, not QuantumListing, but some other listing services that in the software world we call walled gardens. If you don't pay to play, you can't even see your listings. All of our listings are publicly viewable, and when tenants are searching for space, they're searching for space online, and unfortunately, they're not finding enough of it. There's a review here so that we can see the listings that we had saved. You can put a little tour booklet together, but let me focus really quickly on this comparison tool. This is really important, and for tenant clients, this is where the rubber meets the road. You've actually focused on a few finalist buildings. These are all of the ways known to man to compare and contrast sort of apples, oranges, bananas. I mean, you've got rentable and usable square footage, present value, non-present value, cost per rentable square foot per usable, and all the way down to average rent per person per year. So this is a summary table, building A, B, and C. This is actually for this client, the building where we actually made the deal. Behind each of these summaries, these 3 summaries, is a worksheet, which you already know by now. is pre-populated. So all of these items on the left-hand side are all of the potential occupancy costs that we could think of. So if you want to, when you're doing this kind of analysis, if you want to, for whatever reasons, delete some of these items, you can click the X, you can delete it. If you're not sure what a particular issue is, like landlord supervision fees, you can click on the question mark, and Griddig doesn't tell you how to negotiate these items, but we want you to understand what the issue is, and rely on your experts. So again, you've got the whole tenant team here looking at these numbers, but this is a spreadsheet, which is more or less a derivation of Excel, but it's very user friendly. And this is where I would, as a broker, log in with the architect and the contractor on the team. We'll plug these numbers in, and obviously they're shared with the client. You can add some comments here, but unlike the hypothetical program, this is the actual rentable and usable square footage of this particular space. You can put a cost of money in here and this inflation rate, and you can plug in the number of people that we're able to plan in that space. So this comparison tool, you might be wondering, on the landlord side, it's flipped around, isn't it? This is the total occupancy costs for a tenant. On the landlord side of this tool, you have 3 different tenants that have issued proposals for the same space. Which of those tenants is proposing the highest net effective rent for the landlord? That's how the tool is essentially adjusted on the landlord side. The letter of intent, these would be all the letters of intent that were exchanged for this particular client. You'll notice down here, it's to start a new letter of intent. I'll get to that in a minute, but let me just show you what a letter of intent looks like. I'm going to collapse all of the windows here so that you can see. So this was a letter of intent that was crafted for this building in San Francisco. And you'll see that some of the sections are dimmed out, like storage space or temporary premises. Well, that's because those terms were not used in. So that's from a form that is the default form for Griddig. So when you create a letter of intent on Griddig, the first version that's available to you is the default version, which I guarantee you is quite beefy, and was drafted by a 30-year office leasing veteran that you now know. But so everything in the kitchen sink is in here. But as you can see from all of the different terms, including HVAC, there's an exclusive dealing provision in here. There's a brokerage fee provision. We think that this actually saves brokers time and money, by the way, so that you don't need a separate freestanding brokerage agreement when the landlord or the sublessor can agree right in this letter of intent what the brokers are going to be paid and when. So, but let me just, I have to share, this is humorous to me, maybe not to all of you, but we actually put a print button in here simply because we would have people ask us, why don't you PDF this to me? Now, here's the big picture here that I want you to grasp. We're using software to make deals. So when I'm done completing this LOI and I hit send, I'm giving the software permission to show it to the other party. So it literally, it instantaneously populates in the account of the other party. Okay, so we're not having to herd cats. We're not having to issue a PDF email to all of the parties in a transaction. Anyone who is a decision maker, a decision influencer, can be on this team. all you have to do is invite them. Okay, so these are actually buttons on the side here which say your terms. I'm gonna expand this for a quick minute here. I want to mind the time. So let me show you a few highlights here, and you can come back to this anytime. But I want you to know that we've taken an enormous amount of time and expertise to craft this this letter of intent. It's actually a separate app in the App Store, but we've taken a lot of time to craft a master document which you can easily edit. And what I wanted to say is that any letter of intent that I create, I can use as a reuse as a template. So if you're in the office leasing business, you're probably used to having a small one LOI for small tenants, for medium-sized tenants, and for large tenants. So you can do a 200,000 foot deal with the template that we've given you here and all the languages here. So in this particular case, this landlord broker decided that, and she only would address the LOI, and that's obviously up to each landlord and tenant team who's going to be up front. On the tenant side, we've got all of our people notified here and included. So, but this is all the way down to the cover letter. These are text boxes, so you can actually come in here. I could delete this or paste in my own, but once you create your own LOI once, that becomes a permanent template for you. Likewise, and this is kind of the fun part, I think, is that if I send an LOI to you, you can actually use my template as your own, and you recraft it and send it as you wish. So, you know, occupancy cost or the timing of occupancy, renewal options. We have renewal language in here. There's a very lengthy tenant improvement section, which addresses, I think, all the things that any and every really sophisticated broker or building owner would want to address. So, you know, 90+% of the time, we're really replicating the same types of transactions. So that's why we've given you a template. You can, as I said, recraft it in whatever way you'd like to. HVAC, you know, this is sort of an interesting point today as we're dealing with COVID, that you know, building owners obviously pass through HVAC, after hours HVAC costs, and you have to wonder these days, and we're actually going to host a webinar 2 weeks from today about HVAC and whether it's safe to breathe in office buildings. I think we're going to start to see what may be close to hospital quality HVAC equipment going into office buildings at probably great expense, which somehow or another is going to be passed through to tenants. So if a lot of tenants are paying $5 per square foot per year for after-hours air conditioning today, that number could easily double. So anyway, so this is the LOI. There is version history. You'll see on each of these sections, there's a view history. You can see this was from the template and how it changed. And so each version that goes back and forth, if you want to see the most recent version, you're going to click on the view history. There's a help button, again, like the other help buttons I've described for you. You can omit sections like parking. This was omitted in this deal because there's no parking available in the building. So, but signing and executing, let's see if I can show that to you really quickly. Letters of intent typically are not binding. So on Griddig, this is how a letter of intent gets signed and then fully executed. But the party who is going to sign this types their name in. They check a box agreeing to do business electronically. They agree to the terms and provisions. and they hit the red button. It goes to the other side. It's executed, and so again, the whole idea here is to speed up this entire process, and that's how it works. I want to show you something really quickly here. Going back to client searches, I want to show you very quickly what it takes to start a new project, and David and Julia are going to help me. So I've got I have a new client name, which is QuantumListing.
Woohoo!
And I'm going to send an invitation to, this is how we create a project. Okay. So is it just David at?
David at QuantumListing, yep.
Okay, all right. And this is going to be, 2020 office search. That's what we're going to call this project.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm going to add, I've got this new client, QuantumListing. Okay. Now I've just sent once I do that, Griddig will instantaneously send an invitation to David, which will say something to the effect that, Dan Mihalovich, broker of the space place, has invited you to collaborate on this project. Here's the project right here. I'm going to open it up, and what you're going to see is that here's the project we just created. I've invited David, and what if I want to invite other team members? I'm going to invite Julia.
All right, so I've gotten your invitation, Dan, and I am putting it on. I'm on my phone. I can do. We'll see if I can do it on my phone. Otherwise, I'll do it on the computer. Yes, I can.
Yeah. So this is how easy it is to create a team and get this thing started. And again, for brokers or tenants, I mean, anyone can create a project. It doesn't have to be a broker. A landlord can start this off. A broker, a tenant, any of the service providers. And it's really interesting that if you query architects and contractors around the world, and I'm confident, they would all tell you that unfortunately for their clients, they typically are not invited onto the team or into the picture, irrespective of the immense experience that they have. They're generally not invited into the fold usually until it's too late. Mistakes have been made, and so let's see if I'm going to just refresh the screen here and see if both Julia and David have accepted the invitation. So here they are. Okay, and we're ready to start calculating how much space they need. And yes, how are we doing so far?
So you're doing great. Doing great.
So we're gonna give you two of these private offices, and and a reception area and a boardroom. I'm not going to make too many other changes here, but what you can see is that as soon as we start plugging in numbers, we'll give you a kitchen, but you're not allowed to eat with your mask on.
Can I have a coat closet?
You can have a coat closet.
I'm in the Northeast.
Yeah, we're gonna show you. We're gonna expand to two coat closets. But you see how this starts to work. And if I save this, it's going to show that Dan, broker, saved this today's date. And anytime you want to, David and Julia, you can log in. And so let me. I'm not sure there are other. Let me just show you something about listings. So for people that are on the landlord side, I want you to understand. I'm going to try to get you to visualize for just a quick minute that the same kind of sort of tombstones that you have on the tenant side, you'll have on the listing side. So if I'm a landlord with 20 buildings around the country, I'm going to have 20 squares like this basically for each of my buildings, and I'll be able to dive into any individual space that is listed within that square, and to see the listing activity for that particular space. and the team members that are associated with each of those transactions. Okay, so before I leave this one window, I just want to show you that we were trying to have a serious chat with this international law firm. And so what I did in prep for the meeting was I created projects for them. This one is for Ann Arbor, Michigan, for Beijing, for Boston, LA, San Francisco, New York, Silicon Valley, Singapore. And the idea is to, again, to show them this is how we will manage your projects. And the organization and the level of detail that we can bring to you, with this kind of technology. Back to listings, I left an old sublease listing in here. So this, remember that the Space Place is a tenant rep firm. So we typically, and at the moment, really don't have any sublease listings, but I have a feeling that's going to change very quickly. Let me show you what the listing looks like. And I want to open this up for Q&A. I hope people are posting questions, but so what we show here is that there are 4 steps to creating a listing, but what I can cut to the chase here and tell you, they're really just 2. There's the information in red. These are required. Everyone, not just the lister, but in particular tenants that might be interested in the space, give them a little more information than you normally provide to who. The big gorilla in the room in the listing business. I don't think I have to mention them by name, but simple things like views. What view does the space have? Okay, can you describe that? Just check a box or boxes. What direction am I looking from the space? I mean, there's simple things like that. We enable in step 2, you can put your own photo show together for the space. If you like using View the Space, you can take your View the Space video and paste the link right in here. If you use YouTube or Vimeo, you take your iPhone video. Video is obviously becoming really, really popular right now because tenants don't want to tour spaces, so they don't absolutely have to. You can attach a flyer and a floor plan. You can attach path of travel documents or CAD files. If you have a furniture inventory, you're trying to sublease a furnished space, you can attach that. I mean, we're trying to make this as user-friendly. And by the way, who is uploading this information? And I'm afraid to say this is the painful part, that it's the listor that uploads this information. And I say that it's painful because I think what brokers have gotten used to, and the building owners, is dropping their information in the tube that gets sent off to a third party who hopefully will publish what you've sent them. And without typos and without messing up data. Our philosophy very simply is the party that controls the space is going to present 100% accurate information, and this becomes public. Now, step 3, if I want to, it's not required. This was a sublease for a law firm. This was the firm administrator for the firm. We included her on the team. If you want to give more detail down here, you can, but this is really pretty straightforward, and that's the way our listing system works. Let's see, what else did I want to show you on this? Here, let me just look at the letters of intent. So if I click on letters of intent for this particular space, again, here's the team. Here's that comparison that I told you about earlier, where you would fill in the proposals from 3 different tenants or subtenants here, and then the letters of intent that are going back and forth on this particular space. But that is how the listings work. Again, if you're the landlord or broker for a dozen buildings or more, you'll have these tombstones where it's very easy for you to follow the information and hopefully get deals done a lot faster than ever before. So that's kind of the nutshell of how Griddig works. I'm going to just log out so that it takes you back to this original page. You don't need to see this, I think, once you're an active member. I'll point out just for kicks, we've kept everything free on Griddig. So even the premium tools are free. They've been free for quite some time. But we're trying to leave the barn doors wide open so that people such as yourselves can log in, create an account. I will say that signing up is pretty quick and easy. So if you're a broker, these are all the required fields. So it'll take you about 30 seconds to create an account, and then you're off and running. So one other thing I wanted to show you just for fun is on our brokerage website. And this is what I wanted to show you. It's in the middle of the screen here. It says, try our free calculate tool. And this is a freebie that Griddig actually built this widget. And this is a lead gen tool for any broker, any building owner, anyone who has listings. What we're trying to do here for tenants is to help them very quickly, as it says, get a real world estimate of your total space requirements before you search for space. So what we've done here is, and again, when I said this is a free tool, this is our gift to anyone who wants it. It's just a few lines of code. You can paste this and customize it into your own website and with pleasure. So you can, so the Space Place logo is red and white, so you can customize and make the buttons match the colors of your website. You can also customize some of this language, but essentially in a matter of like 2 questions, we're asking people, hey, how many people do you have? If you want to calculate, your square footage, you put in the number of people, and the next screen, or it might be 2 screens later, people have the opportunity to give you their name, their contact information, and say, hey, would you mind calling me to help me with my space requirement? So it's a lead gen widget, Griddig built. The Space Place is using it. All of you can use it, or send it to a friend if you'd like. My contact information is pretty easy to find, but dan@griddig.com, and I'd be happy to speak with any of you about anything we've discussed today. And I'll put my camera back on here and happy to address questions.
I've got a question, Dan. So clearly this was designed for the office market because that's what you know best. And my practice is more of my brokerage practice is more of a general practice. So I'm doing retail deals and I'm doing industrial deals, the occasional investment sale. So, I mean, the calculator obviously is designed for office, but am I correct in thinking that the rest of the tools that you've shown us are equally applicable to any other asset class or type of transaction?
Yeah, I mean, the platform the way it is right now, and remember, this is software that's your software is never done. You're always trying to craft new things, and or if something breaks to fix it. But the platform right now is pretty pure and focused on office leasing. Could it be modified pretty easily to? It's just a matter of funds, really, and interest from customers to target whether it's retail or industrial or even the potential sale of buildings. But right now, it's really just focused on office. Like the letter of intent, I suppose you could craft that into a retail deal, certainly. But so I didn't mention this, and I hope it's obvious. All of the tools, except for the listing tool which is geared toward the San Francisco Bay Area. All of these tools are usable universally. So you can send a letter of intent to anyone for any building in any market. It's not, nothing is tied to San Francisco or the San Francisco Bay Area except for our listing tool.
I mean, I have one landlord who I represent for her office building, and she likes to do the letters of intent, which, it's fine. I have no pride of authorship, but sometimes there's a little more back and forth that goes on as a result of that. And with a collaboration tool like you've shown us, it could save a couple of days here and there in a transaction. And as all brokers know, time kills all deals. And to the extent that we can make keep the train on the tracks instead of letting it get derailed, I think it's really valuable to us.
Yeah. So look, if your client is, we all work for our clients. So we have to keep in mind, and I think a lot of people don't always focus on that. The client's the boss, and we're trying to, as fiduciaries, advise our clients in the best way we know how. If they have sort of proprietary forms that they want to use, you can easily sort of cut and paste that into Griddig, and it becomes their template on Griddig, and it's pretty easy to do. So our transactions they all take way too long. And I was thinking before the call of some of the experience I didn't mention this before, but as a broker, I've represented like 40 law firms, including Wilson Sonsini. I represented the California Academy of Sciences, which for East Coast people is our version of the Smithsonian. I worked on a lot of really challenging deals, and sometimes I think of a particular landlord. I worked on 5 transactions in the same building, and you would think that, and logically you would think, well, why don't we just sort of pick up where we left off on the last transaction? It's like, well, no, we have to start at the beginning of these negotiations, and this is just the way we do things. And so you have this sort of institutional ownership where it's part of our dinosaur complex that some people are coming along a lot faster than others. It's just, the residential side of the business, I think, is sped way ahead of us on the tech side and users. But I will say that I've spoken to the Zillow people, for example. I told them, I said, when I go to your website, you give me pretty much everything I need. You introduce me to a broker, to mortgage finance. You give me all the neighborhood data. I see the house I want to buy, and then you send me away to actually do my deal. Why don't you host transactions on your website, since you have all the parties there, right? And they, I guess it was none of my business because they didn't have a really great answer for me. But it's sort of mind-boggling that our industry is still doing deals the kind of the old-fashioned way. It's just not. It's not necessary, and it's only a matter of time. As I've told my friends, hopefully before I die, that a platform like Griddig, if not Griddig, is simply going to become the default way that deals are done.
Yeah, like I think there's a vested interest in institutional owners or not having perfect information in the real estate industry the way there is in the stock market or the commodities trading business, because they feel that imperfect information gives them an edge, but it sure makes everything a lot harder and more time consuming.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know what? Free markets eventually deliver efficiency that some people aren't expecting and will be hurt by. But when you you think about what Charles Schwab did to and for that industry. I mean, it took a long time for them to really take hold, but once it did, and I mean that's how paradigms work. You know, we don't wake up. Well, not most of us don't wake up every day wondering how has the paradigm changed today. That's just once it does, that's it, and you're either on the train or you're not.
Yeah.
So.
We have a question in the chat. It says, how will the square footage requirements for COVID-19 affect the cost per square foot for office space?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's I think the simple answer is that's going to be a work in progress. The discussions I had with, we have an architectural firm that I've really leaned on to help us to develop our space programming tool. And so what we're going to do is, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to adjust the circulation factor. So instead of assuming a 40% circulation factor, it's going to be something higher than that. I don't know whether it'll be 45 or 50 or more. But think about this: if you want to maintain a separation of at least 6 feet, if you're in an office on a multi-tenant floor, that multi-tenant corridor is not 6 feet wide. Code is 5 feet. So we're gonna start developing one way, like when you go to some of your grocery stores now, you'll see arrows on the taped onto the floor, telling you this is the direction of this aisle, so that people aren't having sort of head-on kinds of confrontations. Corridors are potentially going to be expanded, so that if in a typical building you'd have like a 2/3 wrap of a corridor on a multi-tenant floor, it might have to be a full wrap, so that you have one direction only of traffic flow. And then within the space, you're going to have far less density in conference rooms or any kind of seating area. This webinar we're going to have, and I hope everyone will join us next week it'll be next Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. But we're going to have this HVAC specialist, and the topic it's so interesting, but simple things that everyone's become accustomed to. Food service in the office environment. Well, you have to take your mask off if you're going to drink or eat. So we're not going to have food service because we don't want to encourage people to take their masks off. What this HVAC expert is going to say is that even if we adopted that hospital level quality of air conditioning in an office environment, it's still not safe to, as we said in the subject line, safe to inhale in an office building because of just human nature. People need to keep apart from one another, have to keep their masks on. But back to the space utilization question, this is really it's a work in progress. And I think the safest sort of ballpark estimate is going to be just to adjust. You might leave all of the other. I mean, a conference room that's 15 by 20 is going to be 15 by 20. How many people can you fit in it? That's going to change dramatically. But the circulation factor is definitely going to kick up, and that might be the safest sort of guesstimate for people trying to plan ahead. But I think what we're also going to, the question wasn't asked this way, but I think virtually every company that has been effectively hosting their employees at home will leave some percentage of those employees working from home. And so I think we're going to see an onslaught of sublease space coming on the market as tenants everywhere, I think, in every major city around the world will be looking to reduce their footprints and probably maintaining some amount of space for staff and sort of the key individuals. But yeah, it's going to be an arduous time, I think, in
Yeah,
the leasing world.
yeah, I think that, and the question is, will tenants, just sort of be in holding patterns until there's a vaccine, or are they going to be planning for the next unforeseen pandemic?
Hmm.
There's a lot of questions in our universe
Yep.
right now. Plus, the investments landlords are going to have to make in contactless elevators,
Yeah.
better filtration systems. There's, yeah, a lot more questions than answers today. How's that going to impact, uh, you know, the rent versus there's now going to be possibly a much greater supply. So maybe will so will the less demand offset the increases in expenses? We're in for a very trying time in that office
I think
market.
we're going to see a lot of really short-term transactions where people are going to try to sort of kick the can down the road and extend their lease for 6 months or a year or maybe 2 years just to try to figure this out. Obviously, there are a lot of businesses that have gone out of business. Uh, I think there are a lot more businesses that will go out of business if they don't adjust their square footage somehow.
Yeah.
Um, uh, Sorry for the other. I can't control that phone. So, but I think that's the type of landscape we're going to have for at least in the near term. I thought I'd just really quickly mention one other anecdote that I had a conversation with a CEO of a really sizable general contractor in the San Francisco Bay Area, and this CEO was a part of a Bay Area wide team of construction professionals where they tied into the health agencies of the different counties around the Bay Area, and they said, look, let's come up with a guideline of safety so that we contractors can return to business. So he started to explain to me the general criteria. As you'd imagine, you show up at the building, and if you're going to be questioned, and if you answer yes to any of those questions, you're not getting in the building. Obviously, they're going to put maximum 2 people, 2 subs or two contractors in a freight elevator at one time, no more than 2 people. They're going to stagger their trades so that they don't have all the trades showing up, in the morning. And of course, they're going to maintain their distance from each other while they're on the floor doing their work. And at the end of this, as part of the conversation, I said, "That's great, but what are those 50 tenants in the building going to do, right? To try to do something similar? How do we get the people to work? Maybe we're going to start going, instead of from 8 to 6 operating hours, maybe buildings are going to become 24/7. If you want to occupy space in this building, well, I'm sorry, you can't be there from 8 to 6. You've got to be there from 9 to midnight. Or we'll just have to see what we need to do to make these buildings safe enough. But it's obviously a bit of a scary prospect right now.
Yeah. So I want to thank Lambert, who's one of our participants today, for asking that question about COVID-19. And clearly, we could spend an hour or two just on that one topic. But so, and the other, I see that Pradeep Reddy, who is one of our partners, is here today also. And I'm going to introduce the two of you. He's got a great technology that we're using on QuantumListing, which I think would do well in the your space search thing that does virtual due diligence. So instead of having to go down to City Hall and pull all the records there and get HUD and DEP and traffic stuff from various sources, he's aggregated all that information in one place. I also want to tell you that Julia put something in the chat saying, does anyone on the web meeting want to try and create a free account while we're on with Dan? And we already have one taker, Thomas Orfino. So thank you, Thomas, for that. and hopefully everybody else who is watching today will also take advantage of Dan's generous offer. Um, it is 4 o'clock, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So, first, thank you everybody who came today to watch this, and if you're watching in the future, thank you. We appreciate it. And Dan, you've poured a lot of work into this, and your heart and your soul, and thank you for sharing this with us today. And
Thank you
it's
for
really,
hosting.
yeah. And I also, of course, want to thank Julia from our team, who is responsible for organizing everything and making sure that I don't inevitably forget something with that. So while we are saying goodbye, hang on a second. I'm trying to figure out what I did here. Hang on. Okay, share my screen. I do have one last slide that I want to show everybody. Hold on. There we go. And this is Dan in his
In my element.
in his element. There you. Thank you. And I saw behind you. I don't know if I can see him right now, but I did see before you had a couple of guitars behind you. Do you want to play us out, Dan?
Sure.
Excellent.
Really?
Yeah.
You want to hear something? You want to hear something?
Oh, you bet I do.
Maybe if see, is Neil Resnick still on? And maybe he wants to sing with me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he had to hop off. He said he had a meeting at 12:30.
Sure, okay. Actually, you know what? That's a photo from our band played at Sweetwater in Mill Valley, and unfortunately, Sweetwater is closed. But if you really want to hear something, I don't know. What do you like?
Bob Dylan, Neil Young, anything. Pat Metheny. I don't know where you're.
If I pick this up and anybody wants to drop off, you just I have to worry. I'm wearing my tennis shorts, so don't get excited when I.
I got caught today on a Zoom meeting wearing my Zoom shirt, but not wearing Zoom pants. I did have pants on though. It was just shorts, so I was busted. But so thank you, Dan, for that disclaimer. Before.
All right, here you go. So, all right. Well, no warm up. I'll just
Okay.
I'll play something I wrote. How about that?
That's perfect. This way we won't get in trouble with YouTube for intellectual property rights.
When I moved back from the Midwest, I wrote the song in the car, and it is appropriately called 70 Westbound. 70 westbound in a Denver frame of mind. Put your R&B away. Drive across Colorado. Smell of diesel in the air. I'm never mind to San Francisco. Back by the girl I once knew. She's a lonely kind of woman who could make it with only one man. Standing at the bar, music trumpet working in the background while the crystals sing and the suntan radiates on my face. crouched here in this corner, thinking of more serious things, like rolling my eyes up and down her, and what it must feel like to be stronger, and to think we got one chance to be close. 70 westbound, 70 westbound, 70 westbound.
All right. That was great. Thank you. And the quantum listing first. That was great. So that was wonderful. And thank you again. And thanks again to everybody for watching. Oh, wait, there's one more comment. What does it say? Thomas said, oh, okay. See, it was Thomas John wanted to know about Dr. John the Night Tripper, but maybe we can set up another, only music session for that. That's great. Thanks, Thomas, for that.
Ira band, let us know. We're available.
Okay. All right. Thanks,
Sweet
everybody.
Rock. Okay.
Be well. Stay safe.
All right. Thank you again. Take care, everybody.
And for those of you who are interested in getting in touch with Dan, here is his contact information. It is, you can call him toll free at 888-474-3400. That's 888-474-3400. Or if you are in the San Francisco market, he is at 415-231-1200. And of course, by email, dan@griddig.com. dan@griddig.com.